going on, everybody? Happy Thirsty Thursday. Welcome to the Week 11 edition of the NFL Betting Show here live on our FTN YouTube page. Chris Meaney, Spit and Speeds, Dane Martinez, and Sam Choudhury in the house here, breaking down all of our favorite picks and props. It is early. There's a few guys that I was looking at. Not going to lie. Actually, I was taking a look at Curtis Samuel props this morning. That's where I'm at in the world. I feel like his catch props probably 2.5, and he had that last week with all the Bills questionable and some questionable tags across the NFL. Not all the props are available, but if you follow us on the Twitter machine and you follow FTN Fantasy and you are subbed with us over at ftnfantasy.com, you get notified right away when we put a pick in our bet tracker and in the Discord channel. Week 11, guys. I missed you guys last week. It sounds like you guys had a pretty solid week, and we're looking ahead to week 11. Dane, what's going on?
Yeah, what's going on? Like you, Meaney, I was looking for a couple of props. I was looking for Colts wide receiver props against the Jets, if you want to know the truth. And I was trying to go under receptions and yards, but they're not there yet. We do have Thursday night football. It's a huge game in the NFC East, and we've got some really big games on the entire card, right? At the top of the AFC with Buffalo and Kansas City, some others out there. In the AFC North, we got a big game too. So this is a huge week. You see it right there, right? I mean, there is some things to be decided. Baltimore and Pittsburgh, and it starts tonight with the Commanders and the Eagles. So I can't believe we're already in week 11, but it's a big one to be sure.
Yeah, it's wild. So you have the NFC East showdown, as you mentioned, at the link. We have the Chiefs still hanging on to the perfect record there on the road against the Buffalo Bills, and then the Baltimore Ravens and Pittsburgh Steelers is a nice little matchup there as well. An offensive coordinator change in Chicago to try to get Caleb Williams and company going, and also the Chargers and the Bengals is a big one as well, with Cincinnati trying to chase down a wild card spot. To Sam, before we get into the picks, what do you think is the most intriguing game here as we enter Week 11? What do you have your eye on?
I think all the games that you guys mentioned all look pretty great. I'm pretty excited about this Jameis Winston revenge game. We have a 0.5 spread. It's a coin flip pick'em, and we were talking about last week. I told Dane you can't fade the fire the head coach narrative. We saw what the Saints did in their first game without Dennis Allen. I mean, we see this time in and time out that a team just gets fired up as soon as they get rid of their head coach. But this one, yeah, we saw Jameis Winston, sort of have his classic Winston game where he turns the ball over. Again, it was a great defense, so I don't think Saints are that great of a defense, but still, I'm pretty excited about this one as well.
Yeah, I was at the game in New Orleans, and it was rocking. I thought that it would just be quiet when Taysom Hill was announced. It was the biggest cheer in the building at the moment. That kind of threw me back a little bit. Like, this guy is a clear fan favorite. They gave some love, of course, to Kamara and booed all over Derek Carr. But man, when they were blocking kicks and kicks were missed, it was absolutely rocking. And I know their season's pretty much lost, but it sounded like, just watching in even post game that the team got behind Rizzy calling the shots, and it was a refreshing change. We'll see what happens against their former quarterback in Jameson. Famous Jameis is what we should say. That was on my mind. Okay, let's get into it. Let's start with Dane. Dane, where are you going? What's your favorite prop here?
Yeah, listen, we talked about some big games going on this week, and I'm all over some of them. The first one is here in the AFC North, right, where the Pittsburgh Steelers take on the Baltimore Ravens, and I'm on George Pickens. I'm on Pickens over at 66.5 receiving yards. You got to go over to the prop shop. I can't tell you enough, all right, because I've got the 66.5 over at Bet365. Over at DK, it's 3 yards higher at 69.5. So if that doesn't tell you kind of where the range is, I think it looks like most people think it could be over that 66.5. We know already that the Baltimore Ravens literally allow the most passing yards in the league. They have given up 3,146 yards so far, and they have given up 23 completions that go over 20 air yards, okay? So to me, that helps a guy like Pickens. Russ is targeting him with those moon balls down the field. I think that plays into it a little bit. bit with Baltimore. And Pickens has been good. Pickens has gone over this number his last 3 games. All the games with Russell Wilson under center, he has gone over this number. He has 7 or more targets in 6 of his last 7 games. So it is clear that he is the favorite target of Russell Wilson. I don't think Big Mike Williams, the recent acquisition, really impacts that target share too much. He may get a red zone target, but in terms of really being the preferential wide receiver for Russ, I don't think it matters. And here's the other thing. Pickens is also good at the point of the catch, right? So we know Baltimore is giving up a lot of passing yards, but even if it is contested, Pickens is great. He has 10 contested catches so far this season. That is second in the league. So I'm not scared of him. We also talk about how Baltimore gives up the deep ball with the air yards. Well, Pickens' ADOT, his average depth of target, is 13.5. And that is second highest among wide receivers in the top, say, 30 with receptions. Okay, you put all that together, I think Pickens is going to be heavily targeted, and I think he sails over this number of 66.5. I mean, Meaney, you know, we've been talking about Pickens, and I think you have him ranked as a wide receiver 1 this week, right? So I think he's ascending, especially with Russell Wilson under center, and I'm going to take this number over.
Yeah, I feel like he's been a staple of this show, eh, guys? Like early on in the year, he was in the 40s, and we were laughing about it because of his big catchability. And last year, leading the NFL in yards per reception. And to your point, Dane, he's been among the leaders in contested catches since he's entered the league. Just need a quarterback to get him the football, and we're seeing that with Russell Wilson. So love the call over 66.5 receiving yards, minus 110 over at Bet365. We'll kick it over to you, Choudhury. What's on your card?
Yeah, we're gonna go with the wagon here. Gonna go with Detroit to win both halves. I mean, I don't understand how they keep giving us this line. I mean, we always find a way to back Detroit. I mean, we were talking about the last time Meaney, you were on. We were talking about how sometimes we like to give the alternate spreads. I mean, I gave out lines minus 2.5. Like if you took the 3, you would have pushed it. So. Exactly why, like if you can get just a little bit more juice, which it was minus 120, which I mean is not bad at all. So, but this one, I mean, there's not really a creative way to play a 13.5 spread. So this was another play that I gave out in the Tennessee game. It was a similar spread. I think it was Detroit minus 10. And this had Detroit, they're minus 13.5. And I don't know why this is even less juice. It was minus 120, I believe then. Now it's minus 105 on Bet365. I think Detroit probably had their worst game this season. I mean, even though they won the game, it was definitely the worst offensive performance they have. At one point, they were down 23-7 at half against Houston. It was the second time in NFL history that a winning team won or overcame a 15 or more point deficit and threw 5 interceptions on the day. So I think that was the absolute floor of this team. Jared Goff obviously wasn't himself, and if there's any way to bounce back, I mean, it would be in this matchup. He faces the Jaguars defense that we've been picking on all season long. Dead last in DVOA against the pass, and he gets to travel back home where he's been a lot better. And I feel like the Jaguars were the complete opposite. I mean, they turned over Sam Darnold, I think it was three times, 3 interceptions. They still just couldn't put anything on the scoreboard. So Detroit's not a team that really eases off the gas in the second half, even if they are up. Again, I want to go back to that Tennessee game where Goff threw, 80 yards, and they just dominated on special teams defense. So even if they do ease off a little bit, I don't think this offense has enough firepower to even put up anything in the second half. So minus 105 to win 2 halves. I mean, that seems like it seems pretty easy to me.
I actually don't understand it, to be honest with you. You know, when you gave this a few weeks ago, we had this discussion. It was against the Titans, and I think I had to sweat that one out for a little bit, but you got it. And we've been talking about the alternate spread. I mean, if you've just been rolling with the lines all year, even against the Packers, can you believe against the Packers in that game, there were like 2.5 3-point favorites in that football game too? Yeah, coming off a game where they threw 5 picks, Goff looked absolutely atrocious, and they still found a way to win that football game. So you're right. I mean, the Jags are going to Mac Jones. They don't have a run game. Some of their weapons in the wide receiver room are battling through injuries. So I absolutely love this call. When I saw you put it in the Discord this morning or in our chat group, and I was just like, really? Is it not like minus 2.5 for like each just a straight up win? That's it. They don't even have to like win by 2 or 3 points in the half. So I love it, man. And I'm right there with you as 13-point favorites. It's hard to get behind a team. In my own pool, my own spread pool, I'm picking them. Dane, would you pick them in your own spread pool? Would you consider Jacksonville covering at all in your own spread pool? 13's a big number.
It is a big number, but if it's under two touchdowns, I'm taking it, and I love the way that Sam is finding ways to go ahead and bet them. I found a way to bet this game. Also, if you want to pivot to that one of my plays is in fact in this game as well. I'm going Jared Goff. I'm going under 29.5 passing attempts for Jared Goff. Quite frankly, they're not going to need him in this one, okay? Jared Goff, by the way, in the 9 games that Detroit has played, he's only gone 30 or more attempts twice. Okay. He's at 26 attempts per game. That's actually 26th among quarterbacks because of that great run game with Gibbs and Monty. The 2 games that he did have 30 or more passes in, the first was the loss to Tampa Bay when they were down. And the other one was what we just saw against the Houston Texans when they were down and they had to come back. That is not going to be the case against the Jacksonville Jaguars. You guys are talking about the 13.5-point spread, right? So in these games where the opponent for the Detroit Lions scored less than 20 points, which I expect the Jacksonville Jaguars to do, those are games against the Cardinals, the Cowboys, the Titans, and the Green Bay Packers. Goff's season high in those ones are 25 passing attempts. In essence, I do not think they are going to need Jared Goff to be a volume thrower. He's coming off 5 interceptions. Why risk it? We all believe Detroit is a wagon. We all believe Detroit is going to be up. We all know what Gibbs and Monty can do in the run game. I expect them to, in essence, not, like Sam says, not put their foot off the gas, but when you're giving the ball to Monty and Gibbs, it's not really taking your foot off the gas, right? And again, he hasn't really gotten to this number unless they have a negative game script like they did against Tampa and like they did against Houston. I don't see a negative game script against Jacksonville, so I'm going under 29.5 attempts. We've seen games where Jared Goff literally throws for less than 100 yards and the Detroit Lions win the game. I think this could be another one on Sunday.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing we've seen over the past couple of years with Dan Campbell, I mean, he's super aggressive. He does not care about running up the score. We've seen it multiple times, trickery, all kinds of just awesomeness when it comes to this Detroit Lions offense. So I like both of those calls by you guys as well. See some people hanging out in the chat. If you guys have any fantasy football questions, any betting questions, and you're hanging out with us live, you can leave them there. We'll address them towards the end of the show. And also circling back on these videos on our YouTube page as well. So if you're watching here on a Saturday morning and the line has changed a little bit, don't hesitate to reach out to us because we do love these edges that we're giving you guys. And as Dane mentioned, check out the prop shop or free tool over at ftnfantasy.com to get the best possible number. But if you have any starter sit questions or betting questions, anything at all, you can always reach out and we'll circle back on these videos before kickoff. And Zane, I'll just say welcome in. Just give us a little bit of context on this question. Worth trading Joe Mixon or Jonathan Taylor for George Pickens? Just like to know maybe what other running backs you have. Certainly if you need a win week 14 to get to the dance, it's something to consider. You just need to get there and then anything could happen. But if you're trading one of those guys to roll with like an Audric Estime as your RB2, for an example, it's not something that I could get behind. But if you need some wide receiver help and you're lucky enough to have all these running backs, like some of my leagues, I have to roll at a guy like Audric Estime. Maybe that's not the move for you. Leave big. This is an NFL show, but we do appreciate the San Jose Sharks hype there on this Thirsty Thursday. So we'll kick it over to my pick here. Nick Chubb. Over 14.5 rushing attempts, minus 110 over at 365, and over 58.5 rushing yards, also at 365. So it's been a brutal start for Nick Chubb, of course, coming off a gruesome injury. He's only had 3 games, and they were all tough matchups. His first game was against Cincy, and, at the time, didn't feel like it was a good run defense. Now we're looking, and it's like, this is like it was a bottom 10 matchup for Nick Chubb. It was his first game, only had 11 attempts and 22 yards. Then he had the Baltimore Ravens at the time, the best rush defense, still arguably the best rush defense in football, 16 for 52 in that game. And then against the Chargers, another good defense and strong run defense, 15 for 39. So he gets the bye week, and now he has a matchup against the Saints. And it just seems like running backs get right against New Orleans. They rank 31st in rush DVOA defense. They've allowed 5.1 yards per carry, which is the second highest mark, 113 rushing yards per game to running backs is the 6th highest mark. Overall, the 5th most rushing yards. Taking a look at the stats hub, 2.6 yards before contact. They're getting owned at the line of scrimmage. And from a fantasy football perspective, if you have Chubb, you're waiting for that big breakout game. I think it could be here. The 2nd most rushing touchdowns allowed, the 3rd most fantasy points per game to running backs. And just looking at all, like I told you guys, I was there at the game and I was just seeing like Bijan and Algier like have success. They combined for 175 rushing yards against them. Chuba Hubbard, 75 in week 9. Javonte Williams had one good game all year. That's it. It's just he's really had one good game. Audric Estime has taken over, it seems. He had 88 yards against the Saints and 2 touchdowns. McLaughlin got in on the fun with 35 and 4 attempts. Remember Sean Tucker?
Yeah.
He had 136 yards against this defense, and that was with Bucky Irving having 81 as well. Kareem Hunt hit the century mark. Nick Chubb had Saquon had 147. That was when the Saints were healthy at the time. So this is a pick'em game. I think they'll be able to lean on him a little bit more. We have the edge on both here, actually. In our projections, we have 15.4 rushing attempts, and there are some books hanging 15.5, but 365 is hanging the 14.5. And the best rushing number I'm seeing is 58.5, and we have him at 65.5. And Mr. Jeff Ratcliffe's a little conservative with his projections. So I think that this could be a breakout game for Nick Chubb. And also the schedule does get tougher for him. So if he's like your 4th or 5th running back, somehow you've been waiting for him, you don't really need him. Just with this matchup against the Saints and maybe an opportunity to sell high. Let's stick inside the same game. Sam, you are going with another running back in Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, Alvin Kamara on the other side. This is a bit juice, but I don't know how you don't play this. I mean, overall on the season, I mean, he's smashed this line with 3 different quarterbacks at this point. Overall, 8 out of 10 games, he has at least 5 catches. He's averaging 5.1 grabs on 6.9 receptions on the season. He leads the team in both target share and route participation rate. I mean, this is a team that just doesn't have wide receivers anymore. 20.5% target share, 72.6% route participation rate. And without Rashid Shaheed, I mean, that's playing with Derek Carr and Spencer Rattler. He's seeing, again, team high 22% target share, seeing almost 9 receptions per game or 9 targets per game without Rashid Shaheed, 8.5 there, averaging almost 6 receptions. The 2 games with Derek Carr, which is pretty much with Shaheed and Olave both out. Olave played a handful of snaps. I think it was 8 snaps to be exact before he got his 2nd concussion. Kamara has a 25.9% target share, almost an 80% route participation rate, up at 79.3%. So he's just running a route on nearly all of Derek Carr's dropbacks. I mean, that can't even be said for any of the wide receivers. It's guys like Taysom Hill who's below Alvin Kamara. And yeah, he'll get a handful of catches here and there, but we know, I mean, Derek Carr, he's historically a check down merchant as well. So he's always going to find Alvin Kamara, especially with no weapons. MVS, obviously, shout out to you, Meaney. I know you had a bunch of MVS props that hit, but even him, you know, he's going to catch a few deep ones here and there, but Alvin Kamara is going to continue to be the steady guy in the intermediate area of the field. It's not a great matchup, but I do think even especially if Cleveland can get pressure on Derek Carr, it's just going to lead to more checkdowns. So, I mean, this guy, he's the number 1 running back, number 1 wide receiver. He just does everything on this offense. And I feel like just with the volume, like I'm more than okay laying the minus 145 juice here.
Yeah, you're not wrong about Carr and check down city for Derek Carr, and 9 targets is wild for a running back without Rashid Shaheed. Yeah, I was looking at MVS again. There's no number on him just yet. His touchdown props at plus 340 at FanDuel. I'll probably dabble again a little bit. I can't imagine his receiving yard number is going to be higher than like 32. He hardly played. He hardly ran any routes, and that was probably the best performance we'll get from MVS the rest of the season. Before we kick it over to you, Dane, we're both on a couple Chiefs here. I'm going to start with your guy, DeAndre Hopkins here, over 49.5 receiving yards, minus 110 over at Bet365. I like that one a little bit more than the catch prop. It's plus 105 again over at Bet365 for DeAndre Hopkins. So the last 2 games been very much involved in this offense with 14 targets, 12 grabs, 142 yards, got touchdowns in those 2 games. Last week was, you know, one of the things I love so much about football is the cornerback wide receiver matchups. I like, you know, the the defense trying to defend and like top corners like Patrick Surtain. Like, what is he going to do? Is he going to follow? Is he going to blanket Hopkins? And he did. He followed him around, and it was just really fun to see. And he's been arguably the best corner in football. And he did a good job against him. Hopkins was still able to find a way to get 4 catches on 5 targets for 56 yards. Christian Benford for the Bills is pretty solid. He's not on Surtain's level, but he is a corner that I respect. But I still think that this number is fairly low. A couple weeks ago, we saw the breakout, the uptick in snaps and routes, like Andy Reid said. And at the time, his catch prop was like 3.5 and 38.5 receiving yards, and he absolutely smashed it. So it does sound like Juju's going to be back here. I'm not too worried about that at all. Isaiah Pacheco is not going to play in this matchup. The Bills have some issues offensively. Like, we're wondering. That's why I was joking about Curtis Samuel. I probably will jump on him. It'd probably be like 2.5, 3.5 catches, but you got Keon Coleman already ruled out. Amari Cooper is limited, and he's been extremely limited in the first couple games. I don't know how up to speed he is. Dalton Kincaid is not practicing. Josh Allen had 0 interceptions in the first 7 games. All of a sudden, he's got like 3 or 4 turnovers over the past couple of weeks. And Kansas City and Spags has done a great job against Josh Allen for the most part, apart from that 13-second game in the playoffs. But so I like this spot. The Chiefs defense has been solid. I think that this will be a competitive game. So we're going to go with DeAndre Hopkins. If you're going to pick one of the two, it would be the yards, but I like them both. And I think they kind of correlate here as well. Dane, I know you've been talking a lot about DeAndre Hopkins. You've been talking a lot about this guy as well, and Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, for sure. As it relates to Kareem Hunt, I think he's going to go over this number of 63.5 rushing yards. You can get it at -114, I believe, over at FanDuel. Again, go on over to the prop shop, because over at DK, it's 2 yards higher at 65.5. And so you mentioned kind of a lot of things that I was going to talk about in this one, Chris, but I also look at this Bills run defense. And the Bills run defense has not been good. They allow 4.9 yards per carry. That's tied for the 3rd most in the NFL. They also have given up 725 yards on explosive carries, right? Carries that go over 10 yards. That's the 2nd most in the NFL. So the idea that they are giving up the big play, I think helps a guy like Hunt, because he could tear one off for 15, 20, 25 yards and get you a good chunk of the way there in just 1 carry. Kareem Hunt's been here for 6 games. He's gone over this number in 4 of the 6 games. And here's the other part I'm thinking about. The Kansas City Chiefs are a defensive team. People don't realize that anymore, okay? Patrick Mahomes in this passing game is less than you may think. I mean, the Chiefs this year run the ball 45% of the time. That's up from 39% of the time last year. Patrick Mahomes and his generational talent that we all know and love, he only has 1 300-yard passing game so far this season. He's actually in fantasy. He's QB 13. He's behind Trevor Lawrence in fantasy points this year. So ironically, I actually believe you mentioned, Meaney, the skill position guys that could be out for Buffalo, like Coleman, like Cooper, like Kincaid. You mentioned Samuel. I think Mac Hollins deserves watching as well on the Buffalo side. But I actually believe it's going to be more Hunt. I actually believe that the Kansas City approach is going to be, let's keep Josh Allen, that Bills offense, who, even though they've been banged up, they've scored 30 or more points in the last 4 games, okay? So I think they're going to try to temper that down. They are going to want to kind of toughen it up, have it be more of an ugly matchup, which plays well to their defense. I believe that is more Kareem Hunt on the ground as well. So you put it all together, I've got Kareem Hunt going over 63.5 yards. He's done it 2/3 of the time. I think he does it again in a matchup where the Chiefs may want to limit the overall production from that Bills offense.
Yeah, I like the call. I was looking at James Cook too on the other side. Like, what's Buffalo's approach going to be? I know Kansas City's, you said it. I mean, their defense it's been the best in the league, really, since the start of last season. It's a big reason why they won the Super Bowl last year. James Cook's rushing attempt props at 13.5. We have him projected for 14, so not a huge edge, but I feel like they may just have to lean on him a little bit more through the air and on the ground if they are shorthanded. The same thing applies. Like, I know Mahomes, from a fantasy football perspective, hasn't been great for him. He has 1 20-point showing. That's it. We're into week 11, but they may want to keep him on the sidelines as well. Since we're on this, yeah, I saw that you just mentioned that, you replied there. Hunt's role when Pacheco is back. It's a discussion that we had on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio this week, Dane, and We both kind of feel like they'll ease Pacheco back in slowly, that maybe this will be like a 50-50 type split towards the end of the season, but Pacheco's their guy. Like, Hunt has been great, but imagine Pacheco in that role. Oh, we've seen it, right? He's got a little bit more burst. I expect him to get his job back. It's going to be maybe a split backfield down the stretch, but
both.
I don't know how much they even care about having the perfect record. If this is a win this weekend for them, I'm sure that is going to be on their mind, but they're also going to want to have like a healthy Pacheco heading into the playoffs. How do you feel, Sam? Like, say Pacheco comes back in 2 weeks. I think they have Carolina next week, so maybe it's not a game that they give him a lot of touches. Like, how do you feel the backfield plays out with a healthy Pacheco down the stretch and then into the postseason? But I'm sure people are really just wondering about a fantasy football perspective. You got to feel like Hunt's usage is going to decline here a little bit down the stretch.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, honestly, maybe in the first game, I could definitely see Pacheco leading the backfield, but I think it is going to be a coin flip, but especially if it's a Carolina matchup. I mean, why would you want to give a guy 20 carries his first game back anyways? And I don't think Hunt looks great, but he's getting the job done. He runs through the hole. He gets the first down. Like, he's running hard. I know his yards per carry is terrible, but he's not making mistakes. He's getting the chains moving. And even you see Andy Reid talking about it, like, he's sort of giving him some leeway. He didn't have a training camp. I mean, he understands where he is at this point of his career. But again, he's not costing the Chiefs any games. I think Pacheco, I think in the playoffs, obviously this is less of a fantasy discussion. We're not playing fantasy. But I think in the playoffs, I could see Pacheco be like a 90% guy where, every game counts, obviously. And I think Pacheco is going to be the far superior back when they're both on the field. But you get these matchups like Carolina. I don't think it really makes sense if you don't need to give them all the touches. Like, I just don't think they are going to. I think they will ease him in. But I could see him being the 1A to a 1A, 1B backfield, but definitely not like an every down back that we probably would have had if he had never gotten hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. You got Saquon, JT, and Mixon. I like moving off of Mixon or JT for one of those wide receivers. You seem like you're in a pretty good spot there at the running back position, and you can use an upgrade. Who knows? Like, Pickens may be your best of the 4 wide receivers the rest of the way. We hope that Tyree can get right here down the stretch. Okay, let's continue. We each have, you and I, Choudhury, each have one more. We'll kick it over to you before I wrap up. Drake May over 27.5 rushing yards.
Yeah, Dane's been talking a lot about our prop shop. This is definitely a huge one, especially when you have these rushing yards for quarterbacks when they're already so low. You want to get every yard possible. This is up at like 30.5 at some books. I think DK and FanDuel both have in the 30s, but here at 27.5, I think it's a good buy low spot. We saw last week he had 24 rushing yards total. Really funny story too. I had like a plus 600 ticket where the last leg I needed was a rushing yards money line, Drake May versus Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams had 15 rushing yards the entire game. Drake May was sitting at 0. And I had it on red zone, so I don't know when he got the 24 rushing yards, but I think he had like 2 scrambles towards the end, just barely hit the money line. So, and that was a game that just that's just a game that we don't expect. When does New England take an early lead and just lead throughout the whole game? So I don't really expect that going forward. They're, I think, 4.5 dogs at home against the Rams. So it projects to be a trailing game script. Regardless, even if it's just tight and competitive game script, we have seen Drake May just constantly scramble in the pocket. A lot of it has to do, he was a scrambler in college. It's nothing new in the NFL, but that offensive line can't protect him for shit either. So, and this Rams defense, even without Aaron Donald, we saw against Miami, they can get to the quarterback, and I definitely expect them to get to Drake May and fluster him in the pocket. Since taking over as a starter, he leads Pats in rushing. He's averaging almost 44.2 yards per game, and that includes week 8 when he only played 30% of snaps before leaving. He had over 40 yards in just the first quarter alone. So, this is a line that he can hit on one carry, but I would project him to be around that 5. I think it's around the 5.5. And when you get to that line, 27.5, like I said, 2 to 3 carries, I definitely think he's going to get there. And yeah, again, I think it's just a buy low spot. It was in the 30s last week. Again, use the prop shop. It is in the 30s on some books, but Bet365, 27.5. Yeah, I really like that one.
Drake May, more 20 fantasy point games than Patrick Mahomes this year. Unbelievable, right? And he's only played a handful of games. It's great. Fantasy's just different. But to your point, the rushing yards is what's kind of helped him get there. So Chase Brown for me, been all over this guy since the Zach Moss news. His catch prop a couple weeks ago was plus 150 for 3. He had 5. Last week, he was around minus 125 for 4, and he had 9 grabs. I don't expect him to have 9 catches this week, but 32 touches in week 9, 24 touches last week against Baltimore. He's got the 16 targets over the 2 games, the 14 grabs, and 89 yards. So the 11 targets last week and the 9 catches is definitely an outlier. T. Higgins hadn't been playing. He's trending up. It sounds like he's going to suit up, but even still, Chase Brown has 2 grabs in every single game but 1. And I was just taking a look at the Chargers, like, their defense is obviously good and is playing the best scoring defense in football. I think they're going to get tested here with some good teams and some good quarterbacks over the next couple of weeks. We'll get a feel on how good this defense is, but they haven't faced a lot of pass catching running backs. They did have a matchup week 7 against James Conner at 51 receiving yards and a couple grabs. Alvin Kamara, your guy, Sam, 55 yards on 6 grabs in week 8. Alexander Madison had a game against them where he had 43 receiving yards on 4 catches. So he's very much the bell cow back in this offense. Khalil Herbert was just brought in, I think, as an insurance piece. I don't expect him to get a lot of touches in this game. So Chase Brown, over 27.5 receiving yards. I don't see any catch props on him. I think they're just probably they're probably waiting, I guess, on maybe T. Higgins. If he's hanging around 3.5, we'll be interested again, and it probably would be plus money. But it doesn't, like, watching him play, it kind of reminds me of Jaylen Warren last year. He was just like knocking on the door, catching some balls, and he looked explosive. And I'm seeing that from Chase Brown. So he's running hard between the tackles. He's getting the trust. And this is a pass-happy team. Like, I know that he had 27 carries against the Raiders, but they won that game 41-24. They kind of leaned on the ground game and ran the football. You know, the Bengals have always, using that pace tool, they're always near the top in terms of pass percentage. Zach Taylor wants to throw the football and let Joe Burrow toss it around the field. So I'm going to take the over 27.5 receiving yards, minus 110 over at Bet365 for Mr. Chase Brown. That'll do it. We got the prop shop. Check that out over at ftnfantasy.com/bet/prop-shop. But we have a link inside the description of this video for you guys to check it out to get the best possible number. Any final words, Dane? You're still hanging around, man. Week 11 Survivor. Where are you going?
Yeah, I'm going with the Dolphins. They're one of the biggest favorites on the board. I actually like the way they look against the Rams. Vegas, to me, is a dumpster fire. And I don't know how much you guys believe in it, but, you know, you get that West Coast team coming east for the 1 o'clock start, the whole body clock of it all. And don't look now. I know it looks putrid, but Miami is somehow still live in the AFC wildcard spot. Right. So they have to win this game to stay live. They can't afford a loss as a 7-point favorite. So I think Miami will, in fact, win the game. And that's all you need, especially with all these kind of big time matchups like we're talking about. Right. We got a lot of good versus good this week, starting tonight on Thursday Night Football. When you also talk about Steelers, Ravens, you talk about Bengals, Chargers, and so many other matchups. It's the Miami Dolphins for me, if you are still alive in knockout pool.
Absolutely love it. I can't imagine there too many people are, man. So kudos to you. And you've been giving the picks all year long here on the NFL Betting Show. Appreciate the kind words in the chat. Good luck with all your picks, all your plays here. Week 11. Again, check out everything over at FTNfantasy.com. From Dane Martinez, Sam Choudhury, myself, Chris Meaney. Let the winners be yours. And we will talk to you guys next week. Cheers.